Welcome to Expand Your Empire, the podcast where women stop deferring wealth and start building financial power. I'm Amanda Taylor, investor, strategist, and disruptor of outdated money rules. It's time to own your worth, grow your assets, and build a legacy that lasts.
So my parents, they're doing fine in retirement, actually better than fine. And if you ask them why, they'll tell you a story. Being smart with money, working hard, planning ahead, which they did. These things are true. They did all of those things. But a lot of it comes down to something they had zero control over. When they were born, relative to the market, they retired into decades that treated them really well. That's not a skill, that's timing, and timing is luck. Look, I love them. I'm not taking anything away from them, but I've stopped pretending the thing that saved them is something I can copy by being disciplined enough, because I can't, and neither can you. And I think that's the most useful sentence anybody's going to say to you about retirement this year. Guys, welcome back to Expand Your Empire. I'm Amanda Taylor, and if you're new here, this show is for women who've already proven they can work. You know how to earn, you know how to lead and manage and fix and hold it together and be the one that people call. That was never the question. The question is the gap between earning and owning, being capable and being free, and nowhere is that gap uglier than retirement. Before I get into it, I want to say something about how this episode's going to sound, because it matters. I've spent a lot of time in rooms where people talk about this stuff. I've done the webinars, the trainings, the conferences, and I have noticed something. The language is bad on purpose, not stupid bad, complicated bad. Words that could have been 3 plain ones instead, or percentages with 2 decimal points when the whole point could have been made with none. There's a whole vocabulary that exists mostly to make you feel like you need somebody to translate it for you, but you don't. It was never that hard. Somebody made it feel exclusive, and then the confusion itself became the product. So today, I'm going to say this the way I would say it to anybody sitting at my kitchen table. You could handle the jargon, you just shouldn't have to. So what we're covering are 2 bets that you're making that you don't control. There's the actual numbers for people our age said out loud, which almost nobody does. There's the whole menu of what you can do about it, all of it, not just the part that that person gets paid to sell. And then the thing I think is really costing us, which isn't the market and it isn't how long you live. Now, I'm not your advisor. Nothing here is advice about your specific situation. I just want you to take this as a starting point for a real conversation, not a replacement for one. Now, like I said, I sat in on a presentation recently, and I sit in on all the nerdy finance things, so you don't have to. But anyway, the guy presenting said something that kind of reorganized the way I think about a lot of this. He said there's 2 things that you cannot know in advance, and they both start with the letter M: mortality and markets. How long you live and what the market does. That's the whole problem. Everything else is detail. And you know what? Mortality is an uncomfortable word because we're talking about death, but nobody gets out of this alive. So it sounds morbid, but it isn't. It's just a fact that the math has to account for. So we've spent a lot of time asking, will I have enough money to retire? But the question underneath that is, enough for how long? And nobody knows. I'm 48. I have no idea whether the money I'm building today eventually needs to support me for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or longer. My grandma's 96, lives by herself, drives, living her best life. But nobody knows this. That's not a reason to panic. It's a reason the plan has to work across more than one possible outcome. So I'll give you the picture he drew because I think it really made a lot of sense. Imagine you have a grid on the wall, 30 rows across, 30 columns down. That's 900 squares. You have a couple. They are both 65 years old. Every square on that grid is one version of how this goes. 1 year she dies, 1 year he does. That's 900 combinations, and you're living exactly one of them, and you don't get to know which. Now, you don't have to guess it exactly. Nobody does. A decent plan, it isn't built to hit one square. It's built to survive a whole stretch of them. But sit with what that actually means. Your plan has to hold up across hundreds of possible outcomes, and you won't find out which one you've got until you are standing in it. That is bet number one. Now, bet number two is the market, and it's not the one you think. The bet isn't, will the market go up over 40 years? Everybody loves that chart. It always recovers. Look at the history. It is true. That is not your risk. Your risk is, what is the market doing in the year or two right when you start pulling your money out? Why is that different? And that's one of the most useful things we'll get to here. If the market drops right as you retire, you're selling your investments at a discount just to buy groceries. And those shares are then gone. They don't get to be there for that market recovery. You sold them at the bottom because you had to eat. So the same portfolio, same average return over 30 years has a different ending depending on what order the good years and the bad years show up in, and we don't control the order. Now, the industry calls this sequence of returns risks. Now, you know it, so when somebody says it in a meeting, don't blink. But the name isn't the useful part. The useful part is this. It's not whether the market drops. It's when. So go back to those squares. You've got hundreds of possible outcomes for how long you'll live, and no way to know what the market's doing the year you need it. Those are our two bets. And again, neither one of them is ours to make. And that's what gets me. We're told constantly that if we just try harder, save more, budget better, be more disciplined, then, we're going to be fine. Which puts the whole outcome on your effort. And that is the trap this show exists to name. You've been over-functioning your way through a problem that really doesn't care how hard you work. So let's put some real numbers out here because we do deserve the honest version. For people between 45 and 54, the average amount in a 401k is about $189,000, but the middle person has about $68,000. That's a big difference. And this is why it happens. If you put 10 people in a room, 9 of them have 50 grand and 1 has 10 million. The average in that room is now over $1 million. And every one of those 9 people would read that number and feel like a complete failure. So that is what the term average does. It gets dragged up by whoever's at the top. But the middle number, that 68,000, is much closer to reality. When you see a headline that says the average Gen Xer has almost 200 grand saved and your stomach drops, well, you might not be behind, you might be normal, and the headline is misleading you. Either way, we've got money to protect and be made. So 2 honest notes, that's just 401k money, okay? It doesn't count IRAs and investment accounts, a pension if you were really lucky, the equity in your house or a business you own. Look, the whole picture is usually better than that one number. And Gen X research, they're all over the place, but I'm just giving you a target. The rule of thumb most of the industry uses is you should have about 6 times of your salary saved by age 50, 10 times by age 67. So if you make $120,000, that is $720,000 by age 50 and $1.2 million by age 67. Put that next to 68,000 and you can see the size of the thing we're not talking about. Okay? And then there's the other shoe. These big firms, they all publish these forecasts for what the market does next. You've got Vanguard, JP Morgan, Fidelity. I will spare you all of the decimal points because you don't really need them, but they disagree about plenty. They do agree on the direction. The US stock market is expected to return losses over the next 10 years. And that's a number you've been carrying around, not a little, a lot less. Now, they could be wrong. Forecasts, you know what, they usually are in one way or another. But that so what is the only part that matters. Again, my parents got rescued by a market that ran hot for decades. That is the luck that a lot of people got. And the people whose entire job is modeling this or telling us in their own careful way, maybe don't count on that same kind of luck. So yes, balances are lower than the target. The market, you know what? Nobody's promising to bail us out. There's no pension really. And Social Security checks, you know, they average about $2,000 a month if you're lucky. So before I give you the options, I want to hand you one thing. And it's the only piece of math in this episode. And once you have it, everything else gets comparable. You have probably heard the 4% rule. It says that you can pull out about 4% of your savings in your first year of retirement and probably not run out over 30 years. This guy worked out the whole equation algorithm in the 90s, and it has just stood as the default ever since. Now, people ask, well, why is it only 4% when stocks supposedly do better? It's because that number has nothing to do with what your money earns. It's what you can safely take out when you have no idea what's coming. The gap between those two things is the price of not knowing. So most people use that rule to answer, how much can I spend? But flip it around and it does something better. It turns any stream of income into a price tag. So pay attention. Take any amount of guaranteed income, multiply it by 25, and that's roughly what you'd need saved to produce the same thing for yourself as the market would. $10,000 a year in income needs about $250,000 of savings behind it. If you want $50,000 a year, you need about $1.25 million. So hold on to that math. It's how you're going to be able to compare everything on the menu against everything else in those same units. And you'll be able to do it in your head, which is the point. I know you hate math, but stick with me. This is really the part that I made the episode for. We've talked a lot about this in previous episodes, but I'm going to say it again and again and again. There is a menu. And it has way more on it than any one thing. And almost nobody has showed you all of the options. So one, and you hear this a lot, wait to claim your Social Security if you can swing it. Every year you wait past your full retirement age up to age 70, that check goes up permanently, automatically, supposedly backed by the federal government. Different. Talk about that at a later date. Now I want you to put that price tag on it. So the guy that was doing that presentation, he was using his own numbers, claiming at 62, Social Security got him and his wife about $46,000 a year. If they waited until 67, that was $50,000. So waiting 5 years was worth about $19,000 a year for life. 19,000 times 25, okay? To produce that much of your own savings instead, you'd need roughly another $500,000 to get there. Okay? Waiting is worth $500,000. Now, nobody's going to earn a commission telling you to wait on your Social Security, which might be why they've never put it that way. The honest caveat, because you do deserve the real version, not a brochure. Social Security is projected to run short sometime in the early 2030s, right around when a lot of us would start claiming. Now, it doesn't mean that it completely disappears. It means it could shrink by roughly a fifth unless Congress does something. Now, they fixed it once before in the 80s, so there is a precedent, but nobody can promise they'll do it again this time. All right, so don't build your whole plan assuming it shows up exactly as promised, but also don't write it off. Okay, plan on a smaller version and let the rest of our menu cover the difference. All right, number 2 is to build a short-term reserve that still pays you. I don't mean keep 2 or 3 years of expenses sitting in cash earning nothing. That doesn't make sense either. Inflation is still working while your money sits there. The point of this bucket isn't to have cash. The point is having money you can reach without being forced to sell long-term investments during a bad market. So this can be money in a short-term, relatively stable place that's still producing something. Is that a high-yield savings account? Is that a money market fund? Is that a life insurance policy? Is that a short-term treasury? A ladder of short-term instruments that are coming due at different times. And you don't necessarily need 2 or 3 years of your entire lifestyle just sitting in your bank account, okay? So let's look at it. If Social Security, rental income, business income, any other guaranteed source of income or something else is already covering those expenses, this bucket only needs to help cover what other sources don't. That's the number that matters. Then if the market falls right after you retire, again, you're not selling investments at the bottom just because your mortgage is due. You've got another place to pull from. So you're giving your long-term money more time to recover. That's the job of this short-term bucket. It's not about maximum growth and it's not about dead cash. It's liquidity and income and time. Right, number 3 is a bond ladder. That's a fancy name for a simple thing. Instead of buying one big bond, you can buy a bunch that come due in different years. One next year, one the year after, and on down the line like stairs. So money shows up on a schedule, whether or not the stock market is having a moment. It won't grow much. It's not supposed to. Its whole job is to be predictable. After a few decades of drama, predictable could sound pretty good. Let's talk about 4. Part-time work or leaving in stages instead of all at once. And I want to be careful here because just work longer is exactly the advice that makes women like us want to break something. That's not what I'm saying. Even a modest amount of income in your 60s changes the math a lot. Every dollar you don't pull out is a dollar that stays invested and keeps growing, and it shortens the stretch that your savings have to cover. So it's not about working forever. It's about not needing your entire nest egg to carry the whole load starting on day 1, okay? And the ownership piece is the part I actually care about. There's a difference between having to take a job at 64 and choosing to keep running something that you've already built. One is a fallback, the other is an asset. So build the second one now while you have the leverage and it stops being a fallback. Number 5 is long-term care insurance, or at least an actual plan. This is the version of the living a long time bet that wrecks people. Not living long and needing really expensive help. It's a different problem from running out of income. And it needs its own answer instead of getting filed under just deal with it later with everything else that we've been putting off since 2008. And I will say this lands on women especially. We live longer. We're more likely to be the one giving the care for free and more likely to be the one who eventually needs to pay for it because there's nobody left to do it for us. Now, number 6 is guaranteed income for life or an annuity. Yes, this is on the menu. It turns a chunk of your money into a paycheck that you cannot outlive by contract. However long you live, whatever the market does. I won't get into the machinery. If you want to talk about it, we can. But account values, growth rates, payout percentages, That's where this gets sold to people. And you don't really need any of that information to decide whether it's worth a bigger conversation. There are 4 things that mattered. What it solves. It solves both of those bets at the same time. It's the only thing on the list that answers, what if I live a long time? And what if the market's ugly when I need it? That does it with one move. Now, what you have to give up is the access and the upside. That money's committed. You can't easily pull it back in a lump, and it won't ride a great market the way your investments would, okay? Their fees generally around maybe 0.5% to 1% a year. And anybody who won't tell you the fee in one plain sentence isn't telling you something, okay? Now, who does this fit? Someone with no pension who wants a floor under her basic expenses, 7 to 12 years maybe before she needs the money. I would say late 50s to mid 60s. Yes, you want your money to be flexible, but you also want it to be protected. If a smaller slice of your money is covering your basic paycheck, the rest of it gets to stop being scared. It doesn't have to play defense. It can go be aggressive because it's not the thing that's keeping your lights on. So guaranteed income or annuities, they get sold as the cautious choice. But I want to say this, what it actually does is let the rest of your money stop being cautious. And none of these cancel each other out. People who do this well usually run 2 or 3 together. Some guaranteed income, some cash, some money still in the market, maybe a little income bridging those early years. You don't have to pick one right answer. You have to know the menu exists. So why haven't you seen all 6 of these options in one place? Maybe sometimes you have. There are plenty of planners who do this well and cover all of it. Social Security, timing, cash, insurance, taxes, debt, the whole picture. If that's your person, fabulous. Keep them. But here's what nobody says at the start of the meeting. Every professional you talk to has a compensation model, mine included, and how someone gets paid can shape what they recommend even when they're acting in good faith. Say your advisor is paid a percentage of the money they manage for you every year on whatever stays in the accounts they control. Common model, perfectly legitimate. But it also means that moving money out of those accounts, maybe into an annuity, maybe into a different investment, into paying off your house, it reduces what they earn. It doesn't make them dishonest. It makes them a person with a payment model. So I'm not telling you to fire anybody. I'm telling you to know how the person across the table gets paid and to notice which options never come up. Look, it's not being cynical. It's being the same clear-eyed woman you are in every other negotiation you've ever run. You would never sign a contract without knowing the other side's incentives. What I think is really going on has nothing to do with being bad at money. People hear this and they totally zone out. We don't trust our own judgment on a decision that plans our future. Not the Social Security decision, not the cash decision, not the guaranteed income decision, not even the basic decision to sit down and look at the numbers. Part of that is what I said at the top. You can't choose between options you were never given in language that you could use. Confusion, it isn't a personal failing when somebody built the confusion in. But the other part is, when you don't feel competent at something, freezing feels safer than choosing wrong. So the accounts sit right where they are. Not because that's the plan, because nobody's plan is a plan. It's just what happened while you were too unsure to move. And I want to name why this hits you, my listener, so specifically. If you're the woman who handles everything, you're good at work, you're good at home, you're the one people call, then a place where you don't feel competent is unbearable. So you avoid it, not out of laziness, out of self-protection. It's easier to be excellent at 11 things than a beginner at the 12th. That's the real cost. It's not the market dropping. It's not living a really long time. Those are just facts that you plan around either way. The damage is in the years spent not deciding, because not deciding, it doesn't protect you from either bet. It just guarantees you're not doing anything about them while the clock is still running. So here's where I have landed by all of this. You might not be behind it all. The number you've been measuring yourself against was probably the wrong number. And if there's a real gap between where you are and where you need to be, it almost certainly is not because you didn't save hard enough. It's because you're being asked to win 2 bets you can't control, using a set of tools that nobody ever laid out for you, honestly, all in one place in words you could actually use. And the answer isn't just to work harder at it. That's the reflex, and I think it's wrong. Effort doesn't fix this one. Structure does. Deciding once how your income gets made and then letting that structure do the work instead of you, which is the whole point of this show. The goal was never to be the most capable woman in the room forever. It's to build something that holds without you holding it. One thing to take with you. I want you to pick the smallest thing on that menu. The one thing you could do this month, not this decade. Usually that's some sort of cash cushion or pulling up your Social Security statement and seeing what waiting is actually worth. That takes 10 minutes to set up an account online. Go do that. Just the one. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again, confidence shows up after the first decision, not before it. It never once showed up first, not with money, not with anything else, not for any of us. So the one small thing, go do it. You don't need me for that. But here's what you can't do alone. Yes, you can pull your Social Security statement in 10 minutes. What you can't do from your kitchen table is see how that number lands next to your 401k, your IRA, whatever cash you're sitting on, the equity in your house, the business you own, and tell you whether that whole arrangement actually produces a life. That's not a discipline problem. That's 6 moving parts nobody's ever put on one page for you. That's why I do my Well Strategy calls. The link is in the show notes. All right, guys. I'm Amanda. Thanks for being here. Go make one decision. And until next time, keep building.
If this lit something up, share it, review it, and get in the room. Join the Expand Your Empire community and start turning wisdom into wealth. You're not too late, and you're not doing this alone.